All right, we're gonna get to chapter 21, racism and black and youth inferiorization.
We're recording now, so kids,
Yeah.
please no show faces.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone want to get us started? Have anything they want to share from this chapter? Maybe from I'm not sure that's they may have mentioned on either pages 251 or 252.
I just want to say this was a really good chapter, especially the opening, 251 and 252. Couldn't really like pinpoint anything because all of it was just pretty good. Let me see. It is now 1987. It is impossible to pick up a newspaper in the United States without seeing one or more articles and references addressing the ever worsening plight of Black people across the entire age spectrum. I'm on page 251, by the way. There are seemingly non-reducible levels of infant mortality and morbidity. There are Black infants being born with AIDS to parents who are drug addicted and who have AIDS. There are massive numbers of Black infants being born to children, teenagers and preteens, who never will be able to parent them effectively. The same infants and children will experience physical and social and psychological neglect. These children will experience physical and sexual abuse. They will experience being inadequately housed, clothed, and fed. They will experience abandonment to welfare systems and foster homes. They subsequently will experience failure to achieve academically and then fail to perform adequately on scholastic achievement tests. Because of their frustration from being stressed and inadequately cared for, they will fail to attend school. Eventually, they will drop out of school. Many Black children and youth will become involved with drugs, either to medicate often unrecognized major depression or to sell drugs to solve their own or their family's financial difficulties, perhaps both. The drugs will be used to suspend briefly a grinding sense of hopelessness and doom. Then addiction sets in. Other Black children and youth will become obsessed with sexual activity to compensate for a profound sense of unmet dependency needs that immature and overwhelmed parents could not and cannot address. The outcome from this will be AIDS, other venereal diseases, male and female prostitution, and another generation of teenage pregnancy and inadequate parenting. The destroyed sense of self, the negative self-image, and self-concept that derive from these overwhelming and stressful circumstances lead these children and youth who have been babysat by the television set to conclude that it is acceptable to use drugs and to sell drugs to one another. And in ever increasing numbers, Black children and youth are concluding that it is perfectly all right to shoot and kill one another when drug deals go badly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Badly, or to kill one another for an expensive pair of shoes or sunglasses, designer sweatsuits, leather gold chains, or clothing. Both these activities lead to their certain incarceration. Sorry, that was a very long paragraph, but I wrote here the whole thing hits because it really does. I mean, she pretty much mapped it out step by step, like exactly how it happens, exactly when it happens. I started laughing at the end because in everyday, like just before reading this book, I always saw that as some form of kind of mental illness to kind of kill each other over that. And I never really was able to pinpoint. I would never have been able to pinpoint it on like, it being because of these conditions and inferiorization specifically. Yeah, that was one of those things where it was just I thought people were acting dumb, but there's a reason they're doing that, and it's about time Black people and non-white people wake up and do something about it. But that whole thing hit.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that gem. All very need to know information. And on page 253, I want to share and comment on this, and it's also I just everything that a lot of things that you read. I'm sure maybe we could all give an example of how we maybe seen some of this in real life because
I wanted to do the same thing.
I've met a person who's had to sell drugs to support their family or selling drugs to support their family while they were even in like high school. So this design is very like real, and maybe we all can share some examples of like the inferiorization patterns we've seen in our life.
I'd like to give an example. This was like an experience from my cousin. She had been started work, and obviously that gave her a sense of independence in her household. The government basically with our NI cards had realized that okay, this person's working, and increased her household mother's rent so high, and that my auntie couldn't afford it, even with the new salary being put on board. And of course, if somebody just got a salary, they're not going to want to separate it as much at a young age. They basically just come into money and they want to experience it for themselves, so they're kind of like no resistant. The government basically said either you pay this X amount, which would have left them with like maybe like 200 spending money, which is not sufficient enough, or you can go on like welfare, and then it will decrease. And then my cousin had to quit her job and go on welfare just to not increase her home's rent. And that is like a false sense of inferiority, a false sense of dependency, forced lack of somebody trying to achieve actualization, just literally setting them back 10 paces, saying, oh, if you want to work, then you better have a job that's this much paying, otherwise you need to go straight back on welfare. That's experience alone, and it being government orchestrated just shows you exactly where the government will rather have you when you are trying to climb. I feel like anybody who tries to like get a sufficient job, the level of taxes that is put onto you puts you at a state of survival again. So it's almost like you're better off just being dependent on the government, or like Big Daddy, I'll call them.
Wow, I've heard that same story play out in the states over here. So telling about the global system of white supremacy.
Um, mine is more like physical abuse, and then involving materialization, like materialism. I have a vivid memory from when I was like a child. I was still in probably in the first grade. Mom had bought me some like Jordans or some pair of shoes I didn't really care about. Um, and I remember like these kids like taking me to the behind the school and then taking my shoes off and then running around with my shoes and like playing like keep away with my shoes. So having to like run around the school with no shoes on because like these bullies had taken my shoes off my feet and were like trying to take them home and stuff. Uh, when I was reading that part about like people getting killed over shoes, it's like, yep, that shit is real. I never got killed over my shoes, but I definitely was like abused because of a certain pair of shoes I was wearing while in elementary by kids who are a lot older than me, who definitely should have known better. But you can't know better when you're like doing what you're programming to do. They were just doing their programming, so I can't even blame them actually.
Yeah.
What was the question again? Sorry.
I don't remember the question. TBH.
To give an example of when what your experience of everything that Ezekiel had read in that part of the first chapter.
I can just relate to that completely. Like, I have a nephew who recently got stabbed in his back and it went through to his lungs because he chose the whole materialism aspect. He chose to go and steal someone's Gucci bag. And because of that, the repercussions were that 8 guys came and tried to kill him over a Gucci bag. It's just the materialism is ridiculous, and the lack of care about life is ridiculous too.
That's disgusting. Disgusting display of black self negation and self discretion and self hate. Please get your brother in his book club if he's after he's done
My
recovering.
nephew, um, that wouldn't happen. Unfortunately, he's living his life by the means of what was just read, and that's his decision to make at this point. I feel like the best thing that we can do is just be an example for people. So when they're ready to come out of the I've literally spoken to my nephew for many years. He's 16 now. He's no longer living with family and stuff. He's in government care now because of this. It's the trajectory, like it's just a pattern. It's a pattern, and it's something that like reading these chapters, I can totally see like how broken and how fragmented us as Black people are, because obviously he was raised by my sister, he was raised by my mother, so clearly there's negative something negative ingrained within
Yep.
us that we pass
Wait,
down.
wait till we get to the next chapter. I'm gonna read this from chapter page 23. Give a lot of context to what we've been talking about. And it goes, in a social power system established for white genetic survival, children classified as non-white, black, brown, red, and yellow are inferiorized systematically, so they will become and remain dependent and susceptible to control throughout their lives. And the terminology of Eric H. Erickson, author of Childhood and Society, when the social environment supports the developing fetus, infant, child, and youth into adult existence, the child psychosocial development advances through the following 8 stages: basic trust, anatomy, initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, generativity, and finally integrity. However, each one of these 8 stages has its counterpart in failure when society fails to support the child systematically. Instead, the social power system subjects the infant and child to an overwhelming degree of stress. Instead of basic trust, there's mistrust. Instead of autonomy, there is shame and doubt. Instead of initiative, there's guilt, the sense of I cannot versus I can. Instead of industry, there's inferiority or lethargy. Instead of identity, there's role confusion. Instead of intimacy, there's isolation. Instead of generativity, there's stagnation. Instead of integrity, there's despair. So I'm sure we can all point to like areas of our lives where we have seen this manifest or where we have personally experienced some of these patterns, these feelings are expressed, what's being expressed here personally within our own behaviors, because we've all been subjected to the system of race and white supremacy.
Yeah, I also highlighted that section because it was so shocking to me to see like all of the things that a child needs to be nurtured and all of the things that none of my parents or like caretakers took into consideration or even thought about, like any of those stages or things. I feel like a lot of people have kids and then just expect them to like somehow become adults that are fully functioning without them doing any work or like emotional like work to like help them with emotional maturity and growth. And then they just expect the kids to just be like emotionally mature, functioning adults. And then they have this like resentment towards them when they're not. And it's like there's so much that we didn't even, you or like that parents didn't even give to their children to like help them become those functioning adults. It's pretty crazy when you think about like some people just have kids and then just don't even think about their emotional growth or anything. Like, yeah.
100% agree with you. Kind of had emotional breakdown recently about that. Like, oh my gosh, adulting. What is it?
Yeah, shit. I don't, nigga, I don't know how to be an adult either. And since my white supremacy, we are definitely forced to function as children. So thanks for sharing that, Adanish.
That
Wow.
is true. Like everything that Ashley said, it just kind of just sparks things in my mind of like it just sparks like little parts of my childhood where things were absent that I knew I needed, or where I realized, oh, this person experiences life differently to me. Like it's not like this in my house. Or my mom doesn't know this sort of things. Like what Adinish said about adulting, what is it? I came into that understanding when I'd say that I developed burnout syndrome from work, like basically not understanding a white supremacist. In fact, the work environment that I was in was a middle class environment. So I was like an administrator to a hearing therapist, and amongst that is audiology department heads, and that role that like lots of them were like therapists, and that role was very much in the environment that I was in was middle class upbringing, so very European white Asili operating there, and I didn't realize it till really late, and I developed burnout syndrome. But then I understood, wow, there's elements of me that is very childlike versus um what it means to be an adult, or rising up to responsibility, or rising up to constantly defending myself, or putting myself in a position where I am that protector that I need in a work environment. Like yeah, so I fully much realized that I don't, there's so many elements of adulting that I do not have, and there's even levels of emotional maturity that I've surpassed my mother. And I understood that of course, there's so many different elements and things I'm still learning from my mother and her experience. But as somebody who I wouldn't say is the most educated in white supremacy and academia, I was being relied on for a lot of things in the household in terms of getting things in order, housing in order, council tax in order, governmental official things being done in order. And I realized like even like the way that was being enforced by my grandmother to make sure I do it for my uncle and my mother and my aunties, I felt like I was being forced to do the forms of adulting that they didn't or couldn't do. But I'm still extremely naive in so many ways of the world. So like I'm prepared to function like an administrator, but I'm not prepared to, but I haven't been prepared to function as a fully self-interest, best interest seeking individual, if that makes sense. And a lot of that is what adulting is, having the responsibility, taking on the responsibility and discipline to operate in your best interest, including your generational wealth, group self-respect. Like, yeah, I'm realizing that.
I think our generation took on a lot of responsibility in our youth. I can speak for myself, being from a broken kind of home, in a broken kind of environment. So I have lots of brothers and sisters. My dad has lots of children from previous relationships. And then my mum and dad got married. They had me, but my mum also had children from another relationship too. And by the time I was 8, I had my first niece, and then I have altogether like 15 nieces and nephews. And by the time I was in primary school, I was helping to raise my nieces and nephews. So I had that responsibility on me as a child. So as an adult now, there's like certain responsibilities that I have that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because I can easily find myself doing stuff for other people, but when it comes to myself, it's like I was never a focal point. So putting myself at the focal point, and now even becoming like an entrepreneur, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Mm. Yeah, so let's talk about why this process of inferiorization happens. And the answer to that is white genetic survival. And white genetic survival has an infinite amount of manifestation because this is like an ever evolving reality. So this is on page 254. And she says, few blacks or other non-white people are aware that white people are conducting major discussions on the white birth rate. Few blacks or other non-white people are aware that white scholars and experts are discussing the projection that by the year 2073, whites will represent fewer than 3% of the people on the planet. Few blacks or other non-white people are aware that white experts are projecting that within 6 to 9 generations, non-white people will represent the majority of people in the US. Few blacks or other non-white people are aware that these white experts are concluding that they will be left in a state of peril if these facts are ignored. The war for white genetic survival is conducted simultaneously on 9 battlefronts: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, military. The war is conducted through all forms of behavior. In addition, within each of these areas of activity, there have evolved a myriad of institutions, all of which further the goal of white supremacy. So this is why we have inferiorization, and this is only going to intensify. This is why they keep building prisons, and this is why in places where there's a large population of black or melanated people, they build prisons, and the prisons are compared to Scandinavian countries are like hell on earth. Where in Scandinavian countries they have like nice prisons and they like actually are rehabilitated there. Have like PlayStations in their cells. Where in these prisons we have black people stabbing each other for packs of smokes and getting and like a whole bunch of racial violence going on inside prisons as well. And prisons where you have in places where you have a large amounts of black people. So this is only going to intensify in the schools and education. We've seen all the hype for a Lovecraft County country, which was like a huge white supremacist just garbage show full of like kill black and the black male needs to be sacrificed messages. And yeah, I think the really important part.
Yeah, so what you read reminded me of a video that I saw of it was probably like 15 black men at a gas station harassing black women who were like coming to the gas station, and like literally every single one of these black men, all of them were sagging, all of them were like drinking like styrofoam cups of some type of liquid substance, and it was just horrible. It was just horrible, and then it showed me that this is 2020. This is October where I saw this video, and like they were literally a black woman would go to the gas station. They will like surround her, film her, and like make her feel very uncomfortable. And this is what inferiorization is: when you have grown men who don't even have their pens on correctly, looking like I don't want to say it, but looking like buffoons and apes and just like acting like children. But we all know that black men have been inferiorized to the point where they are children and they're considered like considered child. That's my end of my rant. But yeah, that was recent, and I agree that they're building these prisons because they're not black people who are criminals. They're gonna make them criminals, through the programming.
Geez,
Yeah.
and like that just reminds me of like the one of my recent experiments I did where one of the things Dr. Welsing says is that one way for white people to help black people is to tell black people and non-white people what white people talk about when non-whites aren't around. So I post on these terrible, unconstructive anti-racism groups. and I posted a status like trying to get some information, and a lot of the whites told me that when we're not around, that their families either complaining that we're lazy, we don't know how to like get a job, we don't know how to pick ourselves up from the bootstraps. So they inferiorize us so they can then point the finger at us, at our condition. And it was really interesting responses, all that like really context coincides with like the text we're reading. And it just like also reminded me, like, just the responses I was getting is like they're all negative. Basically, like white people just don't see us in a productive light. Very few, none of them understood racism. Very few had a good idea to the length. But one thing that I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, that was something to share.
I don't know what inspired me, but I've also been highly critical of that type of information. Like, what do white people talk about when black people and non-white people are around? And I come to the conclusion that most of the time, when black people are not around, they are uh, practicing white supremacy, practicing how to label black people, practicing how to defend the subjugation of black people, practicing how to just like this is why black people are the way they are. And they'll do that via jokes. They'll do that via name calling. They'll do that via like regurgitating false information about black people. But yeah, I think whenever black people are not around, you're gonna always have white people practicing racism, white supremacy. Like my question is, what do white people talk about when black people are not around? And the answer is how horrible black people are, basically, and how horrible everyone who is white is.
Yeah, it reminds me of the responses I was reading and getting, reminded me of like the theory of incapability. Forget who theorized it, forget who wrote it, but I remember it being it's that white people and a lot of people who have been conditioned by the system of white supremacy are incapable of seeing black people, melanated people, as anything other than niggers, which is like a subhuman creature. So something to think about. Inferiorization process is like has many uses, and not only it justifies like we know the European, the white person needs justification for their behavior to avoid the guilt. So they inferiorize us and then throw us in cages and kill us for being so-called inferiorized, and then they're the good guys for doing it. Hypocritical, yes, but that's expected in this system. Anyone share any comments?
Well, I agree totally.
I enjoyed the part where she kind of talked about the questions that we should be asking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody read that part yet.
Oh no.
I'm
Yeah, those questions are very strong, and I felt like I already envisioned that we'll probably be reading it together, which I think is important.
there was a little part before that. Well, let me go to page 255. It says, what then is to be done? What short and long range strategies and tactics do blacks need to employ in order to neutralize the ongoing white supremacy thrust for white genetic survival, which is achieved through black infant, child, and youth inferiorization? As an initial response to this important question, all black people must abandon the illusion of integration and face the difficult reality that most black people prefer to ignore. You do not win a chess game if you have no knowledge of the exact objective and rules of the game. I guess because this is kind of leading up to those questions, but do you think Black people, I guess two questions. Do you think Black people have abandoned the idea of integration? And the second question, do you think Black people are willing to abandon that idea of integration? Personally, me, I don't think Black people have given up on that idea of integration. I don't think are willing to either. But it seems a little tricky because it seems like nowadays most Black people who have been inferiorized have kind of just given up. I would describe it more as giving up, like not trying to fit in anywhere into society. So maybe I don't even know if they're still betting on integration. I think maybe at this point we realize we're not going to be integrated, and let's just give up. Like we can't. There's nothing else for us to really do. I think that's the behavior I'm seeing.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good question, and it's a question that I think about a lot that I don't know the answer to. I would say, I think Black people believe that there's a certain echelon of people who can be integrated, and they hope that their children can just become within that group. So they tell them, like, go to college, do these things so that you can be in that small accepted group into white supremacy, even though those people are not really accepted. I think that there's a lot of that diversity inclusion stuff. It's just like integration 2.0 or something. And I don't understand why people are still pushing that narrative, because it's not gonna get Black people anywhere. I think but I mean, every time that Black people have tried to do things separately, they've been like bombed or killed.
Mm.
So it's really hard to like say like, oh, we should just be separatists, because it's like, well, there's a valid fear in that too.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I want to finish reading up what Ezekiel started reading because I also have that part highlighted and I think it's super important. And she says, this is on page 255, it is imperative that all Black people understand they are not in a benign environment of benevolence and support, and that the surrounding highly structured environment is deadly. So any person who is not aware of like racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, is destined for destruction. You know, I could be wrong, but given what I know and seen, I think I'm pretty warm.
I don't think you're wrong. For example, you know how people set up traps for rabbits when they're hunting, like those little traps when the rabbit sees food, walks into the cage.
Hmm.
The rabbit knew that that cage thing with the food in it was a trap. He wouldn't walk into it. A lot of Black people are so unaware that these systems exist to cause their emotions to flare up, for them to do something irrational, do something stupid, do something that they can't really take back. So we live in a system where like Black people's emotions are used against them. Black people are like constantly like uh, subtly manipulated into committing actions that will lead to them being subjugated to being locked up. For example, like go to a gas station and someone antagonizes you, your emotions get out of control, and you actually do something that leads you to being subjected to being, now you can go to jail, now you have to go to court, now you have to do all these things. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you were aware that white supremacy and this system and this culture exists for you to do these things, if you were aware that, hey, I'm supposed to behave like this so I can go to jail. I'm supposed to rob somebody for a Gucci bag. I'm supposed to stab somebody for this right here. When you understand that your environment, your social environment, and your social upbringing has conditioned you and wants you to do these things, maybe you wouldn't do it. Like maybe if people are aware of the systems that are in place, they wouldn't be so eager to play this destructive game. That's what I think. Like people say the truth, will set you free. I definitely agree. I agree by being honest with people saying, hey, you robbed somebody for a bag, that was white supremacy. You were supposed to do that. Congratulations. You're following the path of people who do silly things. You're supposed to. Like, you're all sheep. There's supposed to be a sheep in the system. It's supposed to be violent in the system. You're supposed to be ignorant. I'm not gonna go on and on.
Yeah,
About this.
yeah. I wanna keep reading down from 255 and also get us started and reading these 13 14 points she makes regarding this very specific war being waged against black people and non-white people. So I'm gonna read this part and then maybe read like three of the points and then let someone else take over and then we'll take turns reading them. Trey, want to put it on the screen? You have the book on the you have the book right there. A very specific warfare is being waged against blacks and other people classified as non-white in this social system. Further, all must understand that the specific war is racism for the purpose of white genetic survival by any and all necessary means, and inclusive of chemical and biological warfare. Chemical warfare is designer drugs such as crack and PCP. Biological warfare entails the production and cultural and active organisms and viruses such as AIDS. Additionally, Black people must recognize the following points. The war of white genetic survival achieves a major effect through inferiorization or failed psychosocial development, creating dependency, negative self image, negative self concept, and vulnerability. The war of genetic survival attacks the functioning of blacks in general, but most specifically attacks the black male, as it is the black male who most specifically threatens the white genetic survival at the level the black female is unable to approach. Black males must learn to counter the thrust of white supremacy and black inferiorization effectively.
Blacks must discuss openly those means by which black male infants, children, and youth can be supported and developed maximally in order to counter the attack of white supremacy on black male development and functioning. Black male infants, children, and youth need their fathers constantly present to support the behavior and identity of black male children. And because of the historic removal of black fathers from homes, classes are needed to promote high level functioning of black males and their roles as fathers.
The white supremacy attack upon the black male causes the collapse of black family life and a distortion in the role of the black female. This in turn causes a distortion and collapse of the support system for black infants, children, and youth, thereby beginning the process of inferiorization. Blacks must think about openly discuss not how to beg white people to stop racism, because white people will have to continue their efforts for white genetic survival, but instead how black people can organize their own behavior on an ongoing basis, specifically to neutralize white supremacy and its impact on the development of black offspring.
It is futile to beg white people to give grants and funds to foster the maximal development of Black people. To do so is to ask white people to commit white genocide. Blacks must be able to discuss openly the logical necessity for Black inferiorization in white struggle for white genetic survival. The singing of We Shall Overcome will not combat white supremacy or Black inferiorization any more than singing any song will. help to solve a problem in medicine or physics.
Immature and overwhelmed fathers and mothers cannot promote psychosocial development and counter Black inferiorization in the next generation. Single female teenagers cannot promote psychosocial development in male or female offspring, and most certainly they cannot develop male offspring. They can only prepare these male offspring to spend their lives in penal institutions while preparing their own daughters to become teenage mother.
No Black female should become a mother before 30 years of age. No Black male should become a father before 35 years of age. Each Black family should have no more than 2 children, no closer together than 3 years apart. And both Black males and females should, at a minimum, complete high school and become fully self-sufficient before marriage and parenthood. These structures are specifically for the purpose of countering the thrust of Black inferiorization and failed psychosocial development under the conditions of white supremacy. Maximal development of the collective Black genetic and constitutional potential will take place by the efforts of Black people alone through their knowledge, understanding, and behavior.
It is my hope that eventually every Black person in the healing profession will master an understanding of the etiologic chain that leads to Black infertilization. Furthermore, it clearly would be to the benefit of Black people if Black professionals and their efforts of healing pass on this knowledge to their Black patients, enabling their patients to neutralize the impact of white supremacy on their lives and achieve a development of their Black genetic and constitutional potential, second to none. So, anyone have any comments on these 14 points? I think point 11, immature and overwhelmed fathers and mothers cannot promote psychosocial development and counter Black inferiorization in the next generation. Very important. A bunch of babies cannot raise, you know, soldiers who are needed to fight the war of white supremacy. So to think so is silly.
Yeah, for me, what called out to me the most was a lot of them, all of them. We have to embrace all of them, but what called out to me the most, I'd say, was which one was it? I think number 4 and number 6. The white supremacy attack upon the Black males caused the collapse of the Black family life and the distortion of the role in the Black female. This in turn causes a distortion and collapse of the support system of Black infants, children, and youth, thereby beginning the process of inferiorization. I feel like inferiorization on our lives is literally the one way in which white supremacy has been able to keep coasting for so long, even when we do wake up to a certain degree, because shaking off that inferiority, even with knowledge, it's a real process. It requires so much discipline, which we're having to do at a higher scale. I'm sure, like when movements like the civil rights or like Black Panthers was in being moving closer into fruition, it was encouraging it at a wider scale, but with like how like what Ashley was saying about if we was to have some form of segregation, what we're doing at that point is like secluding ourselves in an environment where white people can now target this area and kill us through direct bombing, environmental racism, um, um, hate crimes happening throughout that city or that sector, or it just being in an environment that is dumped on, like it just gives more opportunity for them to target, I think. So I feel like if anything, segregation, we need to practice reversing the process of inferiorization first and foremost, before like I feel like coming together or in coming together that creates it. I don't know. I'll let someone else share what they feel is the most important.
For me, I think complete separation from white people will be a good step. Um, I think completely removing ourselves from like white spaces. That could even mean like if you are able to gather your family and go on your computer and figure out, okay, how can I move to Africa and actually sustain myself. I do think racism, white supremacy will continue to evolve and get worse and worse for Black people. So the one of the, for my personally speaking, I think one of the things to do is separate from white people, separate from white ideals and how white people have programmed us, leave the ghettos that they have like forced us to live in, and like try to like reach some type of like harmony in Africa. And of course, Africa has a lot of issues as well, but like white America and like the white Europe will not help us reach liberation, nor will it ever aid us in reaching our liberation.
All right.
For me, the hold on, let me open the page back again. The ones that I liked or enjoyed the most were numbers 4, 7, and 13. I love it when she tells us like, Black people need to openly discuss these things in public and out in the open amongst one another. I think that that's definitely not being done enough. There are Black people that are scared or ashamed of doing that. So anytime she's telling us to do that, I'm all for it. 13, I enjoyed like her perspective on like when it would be an adequate time to form like a family unit, or things like that, because I have thought about having children and whatnot. But I'm not gonna say I'm gonna wait till I'm 30 or 35, but I enjoyed like what she considered to be a like an effective family unit, or what Black people need to do to create an effective family unit.
Yeah, like bare minimum, she's giving like options. We don't have to follow them to a T, but as long as you're
Yeah,
self-supporting, understand the system, by all means, procreate a soldier for the war. But until you're even have the awareness that there is a war being waged against all Black people, best keep this plantation with as few slaves as possible.
I agree.
Least we can do. Any more comments you would like to share? Closing comments?
Mm.
Yeah, very similar to the previous chapter.
I guess I will say something real quick. I just want, for the viewers with kids out there and everything, I don't know if this was the chapter where she kind of talked about. I don't want kids, because there are a lot of kids out there today that have been born maybe at not the most prime of times, but they shouldn't feel bad about those things. That has nothing to do with them. We appreciate their lives and we love them. They're a gift from the ancestors, and just like any gift, they should be cherished. I was thinking about this in my head when I was reading it, so I wanted to share it too, because although she's not, she's just in order to combat white supremacy and racism, there we need to do some people would classify as radical, but I think it should just be normal. We're gonna have to like move a certain way. So for the kids out there, because I think a lot of kids sometimes feel like, you know, my parents told me like I wasn't planned, but that for some kids that can be traumatic. So telling kids that their parents shouldn't have had them, or something like that. I think we should just clarify, or I'd like to clarify that. We love the kids.
Um, so my closing comment would be this. I'm gonna read from 255. Black people must master this perception of racism, local and global, as war for white genetic survival, a system into which non-white people never can be integrated. So our solutions need to be made with this reality in mind, because we've tried for centuries to hang out with white folk, but they keep killing us, or they keep giving us things that are going to lead to our death. So let's use some logic and let's use some history to our benefit for once, and just move away from dealing with white folk, like what Trey was mentioning. So white folks can pay us what they owe us, and we could go on our merry way wherever we can away from them. And hopefully they'll give us some kind of agreement that they'll actually keep for once in history, where they won't bomb us or destroy us. But fat chance on given the system of white supremacy, but it's better than remaining a slave to them until we die.
I definitely agree with you. I just wanted to ask, I don't know if it's different in America, but what do you classify as black? Is it because I know there's like, for example, you'll have families who already have mixed relations, so they'll have like a white man with a white father, a black woman, and the child be mixed race, but they will identify as black. Would you consider them to be part of the black community, or like how would you define that?
Well, we personally don't define who black who, like anything, because we don't have the power to do so. That's what the white supremacists do, all the classifications, and they've defined black, or they've said any person with a lot of color is black. So that translates to the one drop rule, where if you have one drop of blood in you, you are considered black. And whereas if you can like pass for white, you may be accepted into that classification. That's what we have, like white passing. So white people have the power to play with the classifications and manipulate them. Like that's how we get all those Rachel Dozas or whatever, those people pretending to be black. And that's how we get black people who are able to pretend to be white and white passing, and benefit from the system of white supremacy. So we don't have the power to classify. We just go with what's being told to us, which is you got color in you, you're considered black, either non-white, which and the colors are black, brown, yellow, and red. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely answers my question. It's more about mind than anything, isn't it? Like if your mind's black, because there's a lot of black people out here that, like you said, are so into the system and so blinded that there's going to be a lot of people that will still be stuck. So it's more about mindset.
Yeah, like our minds have been made definitely not like not I don't know, yeah, our minds are very European as well. Like to go out and kill a person is a very European thing to do. To go out and steal for someone and rob someone and lie to them is a very European white thing to do. So we've been made and conditioned to be just like our oppressors.
100% agree with you.
So no one's being like African anymore. Everyone's trying to be white. Everyone's trying to preach the old gospel, go to the white Lord, make a lot of money. No one's trying to be African anymore and be one with nature. No one's trying to fulfill their duty. People just think they just came here to turn up.
I completely agree with you. I feel like another example, a great example of colonialized mentality, which is the white Asili infiltrating West Africa, in the sense that, look at NSARS. Why are we dealing with police brutality? Understanding that it's the levels of power that is causing this, but police brutality around the world on a global scale is done under the aspects of wanting to kill black people for white supremacy's inferiorization and superiority complex and inferiorization and their genetic survival. Like that's why it's done systematically. But then you look at places like Nigeria, where it's a completely black country, and why you're thinking, why the hell is police brutality happening there? And it's because they were colonized by white people. So of course they're going to now adopt these power dynamics in terms of, and especially when they're dealing with an oppressed country in general, if they see if the country's corrupt in a way that the rate the I want to say the economic gap is completely like dispersed and like extremely wide. So bribing is a method that's used, and police brutality comes, well, from my understanding, it comes from a sense of not being able to pay the bribery. So you're bullied in some other way, and then people retaliate. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it's a colonialized mentality that is the reason why you'd see a completely black country still experiencing police brutality.
Exactly. Closing, sharing, and closing comments.
The closing comments for me or for this chapter is if this chapter 21 is more so like an over scheme of chapter 20 in the ways of like what we practically need to get done, or for me chapter 21 is more the formal guidelines of what chapter 20 was for me. So yeah, and the understanding that we need to break this inferiorization to basically survive and thrive.